You're listening to Country First with John Gomez.
And welcome back to Country First on Long Island's only country station, 96.1. Yours truly, John Gomez, with you. And in the house is my good friend Larry Kelly with The Ground Truth. Larry, welcome aboard. How are you, sir?
Oh, great.
Larry, what an election year. I told you it was going to be a Super Bowl. I told you it was going to be the World Series of politics. And I think it turned out that way. Unfortunately, our team didn't really win that much.
Well, I'll tell you, our B13 pick, John Toomey, for County Court Judge, he won big. So
there you go.
I think we single-handedly did that one.
And, of course, Islip, Frank Tantone, who's the chairman of the Islip Republican Party, had him on the program last week. You got to hand it to him. He had a strategy, he followed it, and he won. He used it, and he won.
And
he won big.
And his message was that we're going to bring good government to Islip, and that the town council members, Anthony Seff, John Cochran, and the looks like the winner of the supervisor race, Tom Croce, are going to bring a generational change to town hall. Military background, which is something that we saw respected in Babylon with Gordon winning that race for town council. And that perspective is going to add something to town government, where they're going to be looking for solutions outside town government. They're going to be looking for business solutions, best practices from other towns, and it's going to be innovative government. It'll be something interesting to watch.
How much of the military background do you think, certainly Tantone used that? I mean, all his big candidates, the front three, you've had Seth, you had Cochran, and you had Croce, all with strong military backgrounds. How much, and I know you have a lot of experience in this, working with the military, how much of that played a role in his big victory in the town?
You look at the synergy involved here. It's not just the military backgrounds of these three individuals that were up for town council and town supervisor, but their community backgrounds as well. Because you look at Anthony Seff Jr. and John Cochran Jr., you're talking about generationally. Croce, the same thing. Cochran, his father, U.S. Naval Academy in the 50s, served in Korea for 4 years, became Suffolk County Treasurer, State Assembly. Anthony Seff's father, you might not know this story, but the people in the community know the story. Anthony Seff's father, blown up as part of the NYPD bomb unit by a Puerto Rican separatist bomb. And the entryway to One New York Plaza, New York PD headquarters, is named after Anthony Seff's father.
I did not know that.
And you're talking about Croce with the family background in the community. When you combine people whose families are known to be top shelf people, combined with the military background that you saw in those three candidates, which is once again their own individual achievements, you have a synergy that I think Frank Tantone recognized as being very powerful.
With that line of thinking, let's jump to the 7th LD race, the John Giannott race. I believe you have those characteristics in John's race. Well-known, strong family ties to the neighborhood. He's strongly tied to the neighborhood. Local businessman, successful businessman. And yet, it was such a close call. And I'm going to be honest and frank with you. It disappointed me how close it was. And I think he should have blown him out of the water. But here we have, and according to the records that I see and input that I have, it looks like Calarco is going to squeak through with a win here. And I just don't understand how people can come out and vote for a Calarco versus a Giannott.
Well, it's the value of negative advertising. You see that in elections every now and then, and over time people come to accept that they made a wrong choice responding to negative advertisement, and Giannott was a victim of that kind of negative advertising in this campaign. Things that really should not make a difference to people came into the fore, and people were voting based on those gut feelings that are brought about by the negative advertising.
And it's a shame. We brought that up on this program numerous times. Calarco used the same strategy against Dean Murray for Assembly. Fortunately, Dean Murray was able to win. He won, twice for that seat. Actually, he was in a special election. Then he had to win again. But Sure enough, Calarco, you get the backing of the unions, and you end up with a win.
And the campaign advertising is kept separate and apart from the candidates so that they have some deniability on it. The monies that are raised go to these central committees, so that you have a Democratic committee, a Republican committee that is sending things out from a central warehouse, and the candidates themselves can say, "Oh, I had nothing to do with that," and yet the effect is telling on the electorate.
And again, Sue Cinio's race in the third against Kate Browning, who is a long-term incumbent, Working Families Party member, and seemingly had a local operation with the Democrat Party, and apparently the same operation was being used to try to beat out Croce for Nolan, and unfortunately, they weren't able to pull that out for Sue Cinio.
Well, you look at the inefficiency and the inadequacy of the incumbents, and you see that Newsday article this week on sober homes with Kate Browning's face all over it. And the question is, okay, this is an issue, this is a problem, what have you done to address it over the last 6 years that you've been in office? And when the answer is nothing other than holding press conferences and making noises about something, at some point the people have to come to the conclusion that they need something more. Sue Cinio is a star of the future for the Republican Party in the town of Brookhaven. She's somebody with a great business career. And just as you said about Giannotti, people at some point in this society are going to respect the business owner, are going to respect the person that creates wealth, creates jobs. And it might not have been this year, but the time is coming.
Very good. Larry Kelly from The Ground Truth is with us, talking local politics. Also, like to weigh in on the Joe Paterno incident. Of course, Larry, as an assistant district attorney, you'll have some thoughts on that. So much more on the program coming up. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back to Country First on Long Island's only country station, 96.1. Yours truly, John Gomez, with you. Taking a look at the races, the fallout after the storm of Election Day. And, of course, joining me is my good friend Larry Kelly from The Ground Truth. Larry, before the break, we talked about Giannotti. We talked about Croce and how having that family name, having the history inside the town, inside the community, certainly helped Croce to his victory, helped Senft, helped Cochran, but it didn't seem to trickle through. Although Giannotti gave it a good run, didn't give him the victory. Cinio, same thing. Maybe doesn't have the history in the community that Cochran and Croce had.
Well, the synergy that I talked about in Islip, where you had the exemplary individual military careers of the younger generation candidates combined with the family backgrounds, that's a bulwark against the type of negative advertising that you saw in the Calarco-Giannotti campaign. People weren't going to be throwing sticks and stones at Anthony Senft, who was in a JAG in the Special Forces, or John Cochran, who's a full bird Navy captain, or at Croce for doing what he did in naval intelligence. Once you have that imprimatur of trustworthiness and honesty, the negative advertising is not an option for the opponent. So Giannotti's problem is probably that he was never in the military.
But don't forget, Nolan did try to go negative on Croce, and it probably backfired. The whole thing about how Croce doesn't have a house here. He has a house down in Washington, D.C.
The most telling blow in the Islip race was that at the last town board meeting about 4 days before the election, Nolan had to admit that a special exemption in the New York State real property tax law that had been passed in 2006 and adopted almost immediately by the town of Babylon and other town attorneys' offices that knew how important it was, had been ignored for 5 years by the town of Islip town attorney's office. And the Republicans were able to get out a mailing that came in the mail the day before the election saying, here's what you've lost out on for the last 5 years, but by dint of what the town of Islip has done, not done, with regards to amending this and making this part of an exemption. So every veteran in the town of Islip got a mailing on Monday saying, due to the negligence of the town, you've missed out on this exemption.
Now let's go east a bit here, out in East Hampton. Our good friend Bill Wilkinson. That race is they're still counting the ballots on that.
Still, Friday, we're counting the ballots on that. And what you're looking at is a guy who comes in, retires to Montauk, Bill Wilkinson, has had a great business career in capital cities, ABC, Disney. And he comes into the town and he says, town government's not working. And eventually finds that the town administration has been stealing money from the community preservation funds to fund a lavish service level within the town. And Wilkinson gets elected on his second try. And in his first term, he cuts taxes by 17%. He saves most all of the jobs in the town by reorienting things. And he just does an amazing job. In August, we went out with a number of other candidates to check and see what he had done in East Hampton. He gave a lecture about zero-based budgeting. Was pretty incredible stuff. A great business sense to the town government. So the Democrats, in response, have a slogan that they put out there saying,
we'll bag your leaves and you bag Wilkinson.
You bag Wilkinson, we'll bag your leaves. And this is the only service that was at all impacted by Wilkinson had done in cutting 17% in taxes. All the other services were even better than they had been before. But he said, we're not going to bag your leaves for you. And this led to almost a deadlock in the election where a Democrat is on the verge of maybe beating Wilkinson in this election. And it is just a testament to what the attitude of people in the East Hampton town have with regards to the blue collar, the middle class. Here's a guy that comes in and cuts the middle class's town taxes by 17%. And what do the summer people say? Oh, off with his head. He's not bagging our leaves.
Now let's get this straight. The former administration, a number of them indicted, convicted of crimes, misappropriating funds, stealing funds from one fund to another fund, and making up this grandiose budget that really was smoke and mirrors. He comes in, fixes everything, actually cuts your taxes. Services essentially remain the same, except you have to bag your own leaves. And now that he's put you back on good standing, good footing, they say, you're out. And it's enough to drive you crazy. We're here with Larry Kelly from The Ground Truth, talking local politics. We'll be back with more right after this.
It's Country First with John Gomez on My Country 96.1.
Welcome back to Country First on Long Island's only country station, 96.1. Yours truly, John Gomez, with you. Of course, we kick it off at 8 o'clock sharp every Saturday morning, 8 to 9, 60 minutes of great talk about our country and the best in country music. Joining me is my good friend Larry Kelly with The Ground Truth. Of course, talking about the fallout after Election Day. And Larry, we talked about Babylon. We talked about the great success and victory in Islip. We talked about our good friend, Bill Wilkinson, out in East Hampton. Let's come around and Karen Walutis against Susan Anker. Just mind-boggling, heavily Republican district, and Walutis doesn't come away with a win.
Well, what I see in the Board of Elections as we're looking at some of the ballots out, the absentee ballots out there, is the ticket splitting. And you just have a question as to whether people actually know who the candidates are. They seem to certainly hit those boxes of those people who have come to their doors. That's the only thing that I can make out of some of this ticket splitting things, is that people with personal contact with candidates will vote for those candidates. Sarah Anker's had a lot of advantages from being an incumbent from the special election, had a lot of PBA support. And
she also picked up the Independence Party, which was interesting.
Well, the Independence Party is really the untold story of a lot of these elections. You look in Huntington Town, and you look at the difference between Gene Cook getting elected and Herb Morrow not being elected. And it goes back to the vote differential really looking at the Independence Party. And Frank McKay runs the Independence Party. We've had lunch with him a few times. And he's looking for winners. He's looking for people with a provable track record of winning.
But, based on your analysis of Anchor before Election Day, there's little, if anything, about Susan Anchor that screams winner, other than maybe appearances.
Well, no, incumbency. Incumbency gives her the but for. So McKay and the Independence Party are going to look at someone like that who's an incumbent, and no matter what her lack of record is, and Anchor certainly had a resplendent lack of record, you're looking at somebody that McKay and the Independence Party is going to back because incumbency leads to re-election with what we're looking at.
But, Larry, I'm glad we talked about this issue of incumbency. And everybody wants it. Listen, there's no way you can be living on Long Island and totally satisfied with the economic condition. It's just impossible. You cannot be satisfied with the burden of high taxes. It's impossible.
You're excluding East Hampton Town.
Except for East Hampton Town. Now, one place to look at is either Albany and incumbency or locally incumbency. So if things are not going well over a period of time and things are just getting worse and worse and worse, it would seem to me that this power of incumbency, I'm not denying it's there because it obviously is there, but it would seem to me that people would at the very least want to get rid of what we have or have had for a number of years and start with something fresh and new. Of course, counting aside a few newcomers, Silmy, it wouldn't be fair because he's just only had one term. And it's hard to change the whole direction of the ship and you're just one guy, one or two. But why is it that you've got Anchor, highly favorable because she's an incumbent, and this goes right up to Albany. You've got Flanagan, you've got Rhea, you've got Marcelino, you've got Conti. You got Boyle down on the south. You got Owen Johnson. It's a long list. I'm just curious with this issue of being an incumbent being so strong, and it is true. Why isn't there just this will and desire to vote for anything but what we have?
It's hard to get people to get off the familiarity. And once you're familiar with someone, at least their name, something logs into your brain where you say, okay, acceptable. And then you're going to have to move them off of that acceptable marking to get someone to do something different. And to do something different, a lot of times you have to appeal to the lowest common denominator. And that's where the power of negative advertising comes in. And even though the Calarco-Giannot race was not a race of an incumbent against challenger, it was two people vying for an open seat, you saw the power of the negative advertising to impact the election, where you would talk to someone and they would say, well, I'm not voting for Giannot because he didn't pay his taxes. And that person would be a W-2 person who's never run a business, who's never had a confrontation with a taxing authority. And it's hard to explain all that to someone within the time parameters that you have to convince them that a candidate is a proper candidate.
Right.
So you're going to be stuck with this problem forever because the incumbents are going to have the advantage, the familiar person is going to have the advantage, and you're going to be struggling against that in an era where it's hard to raise any campaign funds.
It really is. Yeah. Especially and if you're a newcomer and a challenger, it's 10 times as hard. We're here with Larry Kelly from The Ground Truth. When we get back, I want to tap into Larry's experience over in Iraq. I don't know how many of you know this, but Larry was the senior rule of law advisor over in southern Iraq, trying to build a democracy. So as we sit here, perhaps some of you share the frustration I have with our voting system. Who gets elected, who doesn't get elected. Maybe he can shed some light, give us some more hope about the great country that we live in and the democracy that we live in. We'll be back with that and so much more right after this. Welcome back to Country First on Long Island's only country station, 96.1. Yours truly, John Gomez, with you. Every Saturday, we kick it off at 8 o'clock, 8 to 9. The best in country music and the best in talk about our country. Joining me, my good friend Larry Kelly with The Ground Truth. talking about the fallout from Election Day. Also, Larry, I know you went over to Iraq. Explain to the audience what you did, and because you and I had to go. I went over to the Board of Elections because I had to see for myself. Well, now we had a host of races that were too close to call, so it came down to absentee ballots. So I know there's a process in play. People go out there, lawyers on both sides, commissioners left and right, rules to follow, and it's an arduous process. It's detailed, it's slow, and I wanted to go and see for myself exactly what happens. And I needed to convince myself that this truly is a democracy, that we, every vote's going to count. We're down because one person told me that the Giannot race was going to come down to 20 votes one way or the other. So each one counts. You also went down there. Give me your thoughts as it relates to your experience over in Iraq.
Good people doing a good thing. And basically in Iraq, what you were dealing with was a group of people that, as a Shia population in southern Iraq, they had been oppressed for the last 35 years by Hussein. And they understood that the ability to vote in a leadership was vital to their futures. And it was a testament to the struggles that they had made in the past. There were generals in Saddam's army that were directed to just raze, R-A-Z-E, raze every building from Baghdad to Basra, down at the southernmost portion of southern Iraq, because the Shia population had rose up after the Operation Desert Storm in revolt against Hussein, and many of the younger generation of the areas of southern Iraq were massacred by Saddam's army. What you had left was a population that understood that this time the Americans finally came all the way and had bestowed a gift on them, a gift of the opportunity for democracy. And with a incredibly talented religious leader in the South, Ayatollah Sistani, we were able to create a framework where there would be a secular election process, separate and apart from the religious, that would allow people to make a secret ballot and vote in people. And in some of the provinces in the South, we saw the younger generation, local mayors who would become governors, local members of local government entities that would move on to a higher level of a government entity through the elections. People that were being measured by merit. And I think in America, the things that disturbed you about the election is that you didn't see merit being rewarded in all instances. You didn't see it with Karen Walutis running. You didn't see it with Susinio running. And you certainly had that appalling specter in East Hampton of the efforts of Bill Wilkinson not being recognized.
Almost as bad, even worse, is that no one's voting. I mean, if you look at the numbers, I think overall only 30, we have it down to 30.5% of registered voters voted in Suffolk County this year. 30.5%.
Well, people have to believe that their vote is going to make a difference to motivate them to make the effort to vote. And in Iraq, we were stuck with convincing people that they could learn all of the steps to making a vote and that no one would retaliate against them for making the vote. And we expended a lot of resources to make those votes happen, and a lot of young American lives were lost in trying to make it happen. A lot of young American service members were seriously wounded in trying to make it happen, but we were successful. And
well, I heard one of the number one reason from one of the people at BOE, that one of the number one reason for people not voting is because they're afraid they're going to be chosen for jury duty. He literally came out and said that to me, and I remember in the old days that was kind of a thought in the back of my mind. Do you think that's true, or do you think it's more of just they don't have any faith in the system? No matter who they vote for, it's still going to be bad.
you're looking to articulate an objective reason for a subjective act. People are not voting for any of hundreds of thousands of reasons. We've run into this. Do you make it a weekend vote? Do you expand it to 3 days?
It's you know what I say. We have 7 games in the World Series. 7 games, I think it is, in the Stanley Cup. 1 day to vote.
Well, the fact is that here you have that option to vote. And what you've said is that 70% of the electorate has allowed their neighbors to make the decision for them. That happens around the world. People decide to vote or not to vote based on a variety of reasons. And in this election, one of the things is they weren't captured by electricity. They weren't captivated by a candidate. You saw on the Democratic side, Ballone's people had some of that going on. And on the Republican side, you didn't.
Actually, quite frankly, I thought Ballone's camp just laid still. They barely did anything.
Well, they were looking to capture whatever electricity was out there, and they did.
Yeah. All right, let's go to a quick break. When we get back, let's talk a little bit about Joe Paterno and college sports. So stay with us. We'll be back right after this.
They say he's a conservative. They say he's extreme. They call him radical. Join John Gomez every Saturday morning at 8. It's your country, your island, your home. My Country 96.1.
And welcome back to Country First. John Gomez with you. Also joined with my good friend Larry Kelly from The Ground Truth. I want to switch gears and talk about the Joe Paterno scandal. Specifically, there's a clip and an analysis by Chris Fowler, the ESPN announcer, as he addresses the scandal, the issues surrounding it. And this is the day, literally, they had him on the phone as the scandal was breaking. The story was breaking that Paterno was being fired. And he says that the decision that the college reached was based purely on business grounds, and it had nothing to do with moral grounds. Here's the clip.
Yeah, but there are so many adjectives, and what can you possibly say? Will this action satisfy the victims and their families, people who have been scarred for life? No. But it's a small gesture the trustees can make to say that the wrongs have to be righted and the healing has to begin. Now, having said that, boards like this and entities at schools and corporations and churches don't make decisions for moral reasons, and neither did this board. This board made this decision based on what's good for the brand, how to rebuild the image, how to move forward, how to cleanse this stain as best they can. And that's what boards make decisions based upon. So this is a business decision, not a moral decision, but I do agree with it.
Well, as a former district attorney, the criminal action is the criminal action, and we all know what should happen to a person that's convicted of that type of crime. That's the end of that segment of it. Then we go into branding and football and college football and branding. And you get into this thing, as the individual indicated in the clip.
Yeah, Fowler.
Where the most important thing to the college is the college brand, not the moral equities of the issue, not the criminality of the issue, but the branding of the college product. And that is a problem that I have seen recently. I'm looking at taking a case against Stony Brook, where Stony Brook's athletic department has more involvement in their own little crises than in moral turpitude and how they treat the student athlete. And this type of insular thinking within the university, where the university and the university brand is everything, is the all or nothing, is at the root of these kinds of crises. It's not that they didn't know what was going on. It's not that Penn State didn't understand what was happening. It was that it was going to impair the brand, and the tens of millions of dollars that come to you if you have a Division I football powerhouse, and the contributions that come from individuals. I had a legal practice in Setauket for 10 years. There are individuals up there that are giving tens of millions of dollars to Stony Brook. And they're giving it to them to try to refine the math department, the science department, and so on. But the university is taking similar amounts of money, $20 million a year, to put it toward football.
Yeah. Well, you know how I feel about athletics in general and professional sports and how it helps our culture, so to speak. And, you know, being involved in the athletic department and the athletes down at the University of Houston when I was down there, that's a whole nother show, a whole nother issue as far as college athletes and how they should be compensated, because I certainly don't believe they're well compensated and justly compensated. But what is the institution supposed to be doing if it's not supposed to be instilling some sense of moral obligation towards community, fellow man, society? What's the institution? And the second part of that is it's being financed by the taxpayer. That's the other that's the other stickler of this whole formula.
You need people with their heads screwed on straight. And I will always remember my brother talking about going and visiting Father Hesburgh when he was an undergraduate when my brother was an undergraduate at Notre Dame, going and visiting Father Hesburgh, who always kept his door open for 2 hours, midnight to 2 a.m. on certain nights for students to come in and talk about what the university is really supposed to do. And if you have an opportunity to go to Notre Dame and you have an opportunity to walk that campus, you are going to find an administration with their head screwed on straight that knows what the moral and ethical requirements are. And God forbid, if Notre Dame ever falls victim to what happened at Penn State.
Notre Dame? I have a bone to pick with Notre Dame. It's is it a Jesuit institution? It's definitely a Catholic institution.
Catholic institution.
All right, a Catholic institution. Just a few years ago, the featured film was the Vagina Monologues, and they didn't stop there. Then they have a featured speaker, Barack Obama. What kind of branding is that for a Christian Catholic school? Listen, if I'm sending and spending the amount of money I'm spending to send my kid to Notre Dame, I certainly don't expect them to be putting on the Vagina Monologues, and I don't expect them to be inviting a socialist Barack Obama to speak there. I don't care if he's our president.
Well,
with that being said,
I differ with you on that, John.
All right, we'll let it go with that, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back fresh next Saturday, 8 o'clock sharp. Hope you join us. And you can always Facebook me, friend me on my Facebook page, John Gomez. I'll see you then.